Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine that we put together here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy so you know what is really going on. We, as an institute, are also part of the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance, VOA.org, along with our friends at Heritage Foundation, Americans for Prosperity, and Middle Resolution, and our great Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, working towards getting school choice into the hands of all parents without government bureaucracy and any forms that need to get you approved by a government board. That doesn't sound like choice to us now, does it? But some people it does. And we have a great lead off to the show on the end of where the parents in Virginia are. Lance Izumi is on with us from the Pacific Research Institute. He's their Senior Director for Education. Just wrote a great piece, The Great Parent Revolt. You can find it online at pacificresearch.org. Lance, welcome back to the show. How are you doing, and Happy New Year?
Well, thank you very much, Joe. It's great to be back on your show. Great to be able to talk to your fellow Virginians.
So much, and there's really, I'm going to keep one side of where the parents are awake, not woke, to borrow the turn of a phrase there on this. But we're going to start with the 17 Virginia school districts that are being investigated by our Attorney General for withholding scholastic achievement information. In some cases, even the most highly sought after National Merit Scholarship Award, 50,000 children in the country make this. And of the ones in Virginia, you would think we'd be having a parade for them, but no, we hid the information from them in many cases so long that they weren't able to include it on college applications. I think that'd be something a college would want to know about. Incoming freshman, Lance, just here in Virginia, there seems to be a reawakening of that which we saw in November of 2019 when Glenn Youngkin rode a wave of parent agitation, both Democrat and Republican, into the governor's mansion. Am I misreading this?
No, you're right on target, Joe. Because I think that what you're seeing here is this great parent revolt, which is going on in Virginia, of course, but actually all across the country. A lot of it stems from what we talk about in my book, The Great Parent Revolt, that it's focused on this divisive, probably the most divisive doctrine ever to threaten America's children, which is critical race theory. And critical race theory, is related to the reason why those commendations were withheld from the students in Virginia, because critical race theory emphasizes concepts such as equity. And equity sounds like it's a great thing, but equity is much different than equality. Equality means being able to have the equal opportunity to achieve to your highest potential. Equity means imposing the same results and outcomes on all students regardless of their potential. And so that's why you see, like in Virginia, where those commendations and awards were withheld from the students, and as you point out, in many cases affected their opportunity to get into the schools they want, get the scholarships they wanted. Well, that information was withheld because to make it, to allow students to be recognized for their achievements would be to undercut equity, the same results for all students. And by singling out students who were high achieving, then you make the students who aren't getting those awards feel badly. And so that's why parents are revolting, not only about specific instances like that, but about political indoctrination going on in their classrooms, both in Virginia and across the country. And you're seeing this play out, and that's what we describe in our book. And we profile a dozen parents, students, and grassroots leaders who are really fighting the war in the trenches. They're ordinary Americans who are doing extraordinary things and being heroes in terms of fighting for the principles of freedom and liberty that we all, should be pushing.
Lance, you talked about critical race theory, and that's an expression that always gets our friends, especially in school administration, up in arms. Those words, you can't find those words in our curriculum anywhere. You can't find it. And we understand that. It's like Greg Brady is there in mom and dad's room saying, those were your exact words. But the idea of using critical race theory as the building block for a curriculum is not something they deny is there. there, and that the social construct, the tribalism, is more important than the individual. And I think this is where they come to, for lack of a better phrase, the crossroads with parents. Parents are all for collectivism until it hurts their child, and then Mama Bear is awoken from her hibernation and comes a calling. And I think that's what we're seeing is it all sounds good in theory until it in fact it impacts their cub, and then Mama Bear is not going to be trifled with.
No, that's absolutely right, Joe. And, no matter what the proponents of this type of political indoctrination call it, whether it's critical race theory, whether it's diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, whatever they call it, the proof is in the pudding. You look at what's going on in the classroom, and, what's going on is the separation of students based upon race into oppressor classes and oppressed classes. And, you just have to see look at the experience of these students. And that's one of the reasons why we interview a student for our book, a student named Joshua, who tells about having to do a so-called privilege walk where the students line up and as the teacher calls out supposed traits of privilege, like I am white, I am male, I am Christian, and every time that trait is supposed to apply to a particular student, that student has to take a step forward. This boy Joshua was the only white male in his class, so he had to take a step forward in front of his whole class, and he felt like it was a criminal lineup and that he was being forced to apologize for things that he had no control over. And so no matter what the indoctrinators call that type of exercise, it's something that parents are revolting against because they can see the inherent unfairness of that and how it damages children emotionally to have to participate in that sort of thing, and it invades their privacy, their and their ability to speak freely. And so I think that that's again a reason why you're seeing parents push back really strongly against critical race theory.
Also, a parent, and I raised 3 children. Well, my wife raised 3 children, and I showed up after the radio station for dinner and said, "Good job, guys, good job." Dad trying to take credit is laughable. But my wife raised 3 kids to be tuned into their efforts are theirs and theirs only, and no one else can take that away. And it has to be what you're built on. But this tribalism seems to take that and throw it on his head and says it doesn't make a difference if the whole collective of your tribe doesn't succeed. It doesn't matter what you do, and if somebody in your tribe does something bad, well, you've done the same thing bad. And I think this is so antithetical to the Judeo-Christian ethic of even just simply the golden rule, Lance, that societally the West has to push back against this for its own survival.
No, that's absolutely right. Because I think one of the things that it is interesting, and which we try and chronicle in our book, is the fact that the parents who are upset about this tribalism that you speak of are not just white parents. These are parents from all across the spectrum. We have parents who are immigrant parents. We have parents from all racial backgrounds, and the immigrant parents are the ones, in many cases, who are the most vociferous and saying that, hey, what's going on in America now is not what they expected, and it's actually something that they were actually escaping from the countries in which they left. For example, you're in Virginia, and we interviewed Xi Van Fleet, who is a Chinese immigrant mom who grew up in communist China during the time of the Cultural Revolution under Mao Zedong, which killed millions of people because of Mao's focus on separating people into different classes based upon their economic status, and he unleashed the Red Guards to not only destroy people's houses, but in many cases drag them out, put them in show trials, and then eventually kill millions of them. And Xi Van Fleet told us that when she came to America, she wanted to escape that type of tribalism and to be able to focus on individual freedom. And what she sees in America now is going back to that totalitarianism that she thought she had left in communist China. And so she's warning the American people that when these types of doctrines are being foisted on the children in America, that what you're really doing is you're recreating a Marxist communist scenario, where you're going to have restriction of free speech. And in the end, what she said to us is that you lose your free speech, and in the end, you could lose your life.
Mm-hmm. And communism is one of the few political ideologies that comes with body bags included into it. Marx himself wrote, some people are just going to have to be removed from society. And it is horrific to think people still think this is a good idea. Lance Izumi is on with us from the Pacific Research Institute. He is the Senior Director of Education, the author of The Great Parent Revolt. Lance, as as we are at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy of this Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance, how far does this Great Parent Revolt go? Because I think some of the Marxists are just hanging on thinking, it'll go away in 6 months when soccer practice begins again, or if we just calm down and we tone it down for 6 months to a year, they'll forget about it and get busy doing other things. Or a new batch of parents will come into first grade and we can start working on them before they get tainted. How far does this go? Are they right, or am I right that parents are always going to be parents and their kids come first?
No, I think you're absolutely right, Joe. I think this is different than whatever crises had gone on before. Yes, it's true that sometimes, a crisis happens, it tends to subside, and then people lose interest. This is something that is not going to subside because what I call the education deep state has really put a lot of their efforts behind making this critical race theory aligned curriculum and teaching, a part of so many curricula across the country. And I think that what you're seeing in terms of the pushback against it, it's not unorganized, the parents who may, show up at a school board meeting, pound on a table, and say that, the school board is wrong to do this. What you're seeing is parents are so motivated by getting this type of divisive doctrine out of the classroom that they're organizing into state and national groups. Moms for Liberty, for example, we interview the co-founder of Moms for Liberty, Tiffany Justice, for our book. And Moms for Liberty has gone from a small organization to now an organization with 200 chapters across the country in many, many states with nearly 100,000 members. You see organizations such as Parents Defending Education, which I know is very strong in Virginia, No Left Turn in Education, which another group, and we interviewed the founder of that organization in our book. And so you have these parents who are now organized, not just at the local level, but the statewide and nationwide. And I think that what you're seeing then after that is that parents are also now running for school board. You've seen that in this last election cycle where you saw school boards across the country, not only red states, but in blue states like my home state here in California, flip to pro-parent majorities. In fact, we had a board down in Los Angeles area, just outside of L.A., which pro-parent majority was elected in November, and the very first thing they did after they were seated was to pass a ban on critical race theory.
Lance, certainly nobody in the audience or in the studio or on the phone wants people to be racist. That's a given, and I feel horrible that we have to say that. But the premise, having debated Dr. Ibram Kendi myself on television, is that if you're not being reparational in your social construct, then you're racist. If you're not doing everything antithetically to Dr. King's call to just live up to the words you wrote down on paper. No. We want new paper. We want all the stuff that you didn't let us have at the onset or kept from us at the onset, including power over you in the way you had power over us. And again, to quote Dr. King, hate just begets more hate, consuming all light around it until it's a night devoid of stars. When we look at the future and what we see in education, we're pushing for school choice. Money follows the child's school choice. Is that the weapon, if you will, that will bring an end to this attitude and force the schools to say, okay, we can no longer be about social indoctrination. We need to get back to teaching kids math, because we've seen the national test scores and they're abysmal. Our kids, now believe, white kids are worse off than black kids, but they can't do math, so they don't know how many black kids and white kids there are in the classroom.
No, absolutely. All of it, what you said, is very true, Joe. The test scores have fallen off the cliff, and it's not just black kids; it's Hispanic kids, it's white kids. Everybody's scores have fallen off the cliff, and so and when you talk about what you were debating with Ibram Kendi about, whatever he says, and he's trying to make this justification about why we should be teaching this so-called anti-racism doctrine, which again is just dressed up, Marxism in the classroom. You have to look at the experiences of all people, and to see, like in my case, like I'm Japanese American, and my grandfather was put in an internment camp during World War II. But the point of America is that we evolve. We should be able to study America's history, warts and all. But we should also be happy that America is founded on principles of freedom and liberty, and that we can evolve because of that. And so that our family went from a situation where my grandfather's in an internment camp in Arkansas for years to the time where because of the principles that our nation is founded upon, I can then rise up to the position that I have currently. And so we are continually evolving. And if we don't recognize that fact, and if we focus on just this tribalistic focus, then we'll never allow people to be able to advance themselves as individuals. And that's one of the reasons why we include such a wide diversity of people in our book, and because the African Americans that we include in the book, say that they don't want to be viewed as a victim for the rest of their life. They don't want their kids to be viewed as a victim for the rest of their lives. They want them to have the ability to do the best they can according to their abilities, and not be weighted down by this doctrine that says they'll never succeed because the system is against them. And that's simply not true, and you just have to look at American history to see that that's not true. And so I think that when you look at all these parents, this great, swath of parents that we've got in this book who are talking about their situations, you realize that what's important for the future of America is not tribalism, but the individual. And I do think that, as you say, the ultimate weapon against critical race theory in the classroom is school choice. And I've just written an article for Pacific Research Institute on that exact topic, that school choice, because it gives parents the opportunity to exit a system that is politically biased and go to either private schools or other types of education settings that allow for a more neutral, objective type of education, focus on the academic basics, that is going to end up, I believe, being the ultimate solution for parents.
Lance Izumi is on with us. He's the Director for Education for the Pacific Research Institute, author of the book, The Great Parent Revolt. Lance, last one, and this keeps me awake at night. I was on the air in a different kind of milieu. I was a rock and roll DJ doing morning radio, and a lot of yucks and a lot of jokes. And when the idea that every child would get a trophy for participation in a sporting event. Oh, sure, the laughs all flowed freely. Joe, even a sport that you could get a trophy and that kind of thing. And it was all fun and games. But now here I am 25 years later, and I'm looking at the fruits of this, and I'm finding more and more young adults who have never, ever come across an instance where their work was disapproved of, was turned down, and companies are struggling with how to do human resources with people who have never been told your work is not good enough. And so I worry that if that's what that generation turned into, and even if it's not a majority, there's enough to be statistically notable. What happens to a generation that's raised, if we don't stop this now, under this idea of you're bad no matter what happens because of the color of your skin and the behavior of some other people? What sort of sociopaths are we breeding if we tell them that their individual behaviors are no longer important and it's just the behavior of the hive mind?
No, it portends terrible, terrible things for the country and for this generation of students. I mean, I go back to the student that we interviewed for this book, Joshua. He was telling us about some other lessons that were taught to him in his middle school. For example, he was doing an art lesson, and the teacher asked him, what did he learn from this art lesson? And he told her, well, I learned that you can do art without being perfect. The teacher's response really astounded him. She said to him, well, perfectionism is part of white supremacy. So perfectionism, neutrality, getting the right answer, those are all part of white supremacy. And, if you think about that, and he also said that, in his school, academic rigor had gone through the floor, where you can turn in papers late, turn in homework late, tests were optional, you had final projects that were made optional. So the entire rigor of the school had, been taken away. And he, was saying that, he comes to school to learn academics, not to be taught social justice, and yet that's exactly what our kids are being taught. And so when those kids who are in that type of situation, who feel that, hey, I can slouch by and get good grades, they're going to have a real awakening when they go into the marketplace and find out that's not how the market works. No, perfectionism is what you need, because companies need that for their bottom line. You need to strive for getting the answers right. You need to, if you don't have a rigorous academic background, you're going to make a really lousy employee. And so I think that, we're going to be ruining the day when we allow this critical race theory and its associated other doctrines into the classroom, because it's not only undermining, the cohesiveness of our country, but it's also undermining the ability of these students to then go out into the workplace and be productive workers.
And like so many things, whether it be climate change or any other of the doctrines the American left has currently adopted, it seems like it doesn't actually achieve the ultimate goal, which is to get rid of racism. It just seems like it creates more. And that's the part that breaks my heart. All this could be understandable if in a year or two nobody can see race anymore. But outside of hot pokers and people's eyeballs, I don't see how that's going to be. We just our hearts are where we're supposed to be working, and our attitudes aren't changing. If anything, they're getting worse.
No, absolutely right, Joe. I mean, I think, again, I underscore the fact that, the people who are upset the most, really, that we saw in our book, are people who are immigrants who are seeing America change before their eyes. I mean, people who came to this country maybe a few decades ago, and now they've seen the America that they loved being, transformed again into the country that they left. And so, I think that unless we do something to, change the direction of education, and I think that parents are, pushing to make that change, and you're seeing parents, when they get elected to school boards and who are gaining more positions of power and pushing their representatives to, focus on their rights, not on the divisive doctrines in the classroom, that you're seeing more progress being made. And I think that the rudder is being pushed in the right direction. But, right now we're at that really like crossroads where, the country could go in one or two ways. Either we're going to, get back on course to where we should have been, and to continue being the great country with based upon our principles of freedom and liberty that we've always been based, or else we're going to go down this other path of totalitarianism, and we're just going to, really implode, I think, as a country and be, a very easy pickings for our adversaries around the world.
That frightens me to no end. Lance Izumi, where was the best place for people to pick up your book, The Great Parent Revolt? At pacificresearch.org, or should they go to Amazon? How should they get the book?
The best way for folks to get The Great Parent Revolt is to go to Amazon.com or any of their favorite online booksellers, and just type in The Great Parent Revolt in the browser. It'll come up, and so they I would highly recommend. It's a great read.
No, it's an important one, especially with so many school board seats up for election this November. Lance, thank you so much for your time this week on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.
Thanks so much, Joe. It's great talking with you and great having a chance to talk with your listeners.